Venus and Mars was Wings' follow-up to the hugely successful Band on the Run, though it was released a full year and a half later. Recording sessions for the album took place in 3 different locations over the span of 5 months: London in November 1974, New Orleans in January and February 1975, and Los Angeles in February and March 1975. Even with the various locations and extended duration of the sessions, not to mention a personnel change after recording had begun, drummer Jeff Britton was replaced by Joe English, Venus and Mars remains a surprisingly cohesive album. On a trip to Jamaica between the London and New Orleans sessions, McCartney laid out all of the lyric sheets for the album's songs and taped them together in a continuous scroll, developing a working order for the album. This demonstrates some significant forethought on the layout and progression of the album. This was not just a random collection of songs thrown together on a whim. Tony Dorsey, who played trombone and arranged horns for the album, said, "McCartney had already written the whole album. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He put the songs together in a purposeful manner, carefully considering the order. According to Cozen and Sinclair, the only time he had done anything similar was during the recording of Abbey Road, when he planned out the medley on side 2. But this was a full album, organized before most of the songs were recorded." This planning actually dated back several months at least before the recording sessions began. Discussing the origins of the album, Cozen and Sinclair indicated that McCartney had been plotting the album's design as early as summer of 1974. With a burst of confidence occasioned by the success of Band on the Run, Paul was toying with the notion of making the next Wings disc a concept album, a unified collection of songs that Wings could perform on tour. Wings guitarist Denny Laine agreed, telling NME in August 1974 that, "I think the next album will be more of a concept album than Band on the Run, a sort of dark side of the moon in the sense of flowing things into one another." While the notion of a true concept album was abandoned at some point, McCartney's extensive planning resulted in a unified album. McCartney had the idea of calling the album Venus and Mars early in the process. He liked it as a phrase and was thinking about it in terms of astrology, imagining a friend who follows the stars. He claimed to have been oblivious to any other meaning, specifically that Venus represented female and Mars male. Whether he truly never thought of it in any other way, McCartney was nonetheless always fascinated when other meanings emerged from his music. Commenting on the 50th anniversary of the album, he said, "After recording the album, we had a great party on the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California, and somebody said, 'Oh, hi Venus, hi Mars,' to Linda and me. So it was a great observation from them. Venus is the female, Mars is the male. It made a lot of sense, really." And, even if it was unintentional, he sets up Venus and Mars as sort of opposed entities, and writing about opposites was not a new exercise for McCartney. Hello, Goodbye is constructed entirely on the basis of opposites and trying to reconcile them. You say yes, I say no, you say stop, and I say go. McCartney also often wrote in counterpoint to Lennon, for instance singing "It's Getting Better," while Lennon saying "It Can't Get No Worse." And, of course, McCartney would continue this theme of opposites with Ebony and Ivory, released in 1982. We can think of these opposites in McCartney's writing as an exploration of yin and yang, the concept that all things exist as inseparable and contradictory opposites. The pairs of equal opposites both attract and complement each other, and a correct balance between the two poles must be reached in order to achieve harmony. While Hello, Goodbye laments that these opposites can't be reconciled, the Venus and Mars theme song states that the two planets are all right tonight, suggesting perhaps they are in alignment. Like yin and yang, they have achieved harmony. Venus and Mars is full of these dualities, and they emerge in many different forms. For instance, when the album was originally conceived, a record had 2 sides. This is obvious, but not irrelevant. It was common to think about the layout of each side of the album, the whole being comprised of 2 sides with a break in the middle for flipping the record, a kind of intermission between its 2 acts. Venus and Mars was no exception. It functions in 2 halves, side 1 beginning with the Venus and Mars theme song, side 2 beginning with its reprise. As I started exploring McCartney's songwriting on this album, I found myself drawn to the overall organization. The order of songs, the keys they're in, and the general musical structure of the album as a whole. I was struck by the sameness of the keys of the songs. Of the 13 songs, 10 and a half of them are in one of 3 keys, and not 3 random keys, but 3 keys very closely related to one another, D, G, and A. Of the 3, D is the most prominently represented key on the album. 5.5 songs are in D more than any other key. Both sides of the album begin with a song in D, the Venus and Mars theme and reprise, and the last song is in D. Thus, D seems to be the home key. We begin there, we end there, and we spend most of our time there. A is the next most prominent key with a total of 3 songs, followed by G with 2 songs. If D is tonic or home, G is its subdominant and A is its dominant. This is a very common tonal relationship in Western music, but particularly in popular music. If you've ever heard musicians talk about a 1-4-5 progression or pattern, they are talking about tonic, subdominant, dominant. In other words, a 1-4-5 progression in the key of D would be D, G, A. To be clear, I don't mean to suggest that the songs on the Venus and Mars album are primarily utilizing 1-4-5 in their chord progressions. This is simply the relationship of the keys of most of the songs on the album, a sort of global look at the album's tonalities. Most of side 1 is spent in or around the home key of D, which is tonic. The next most prominent key is A, dominant. Tonic and dominant have a kind of yin and yang relationship. They balance each other, tonic being perfectly stable, dominant being unstable. Dominant is full of tension, moving to tonic releases that tension. While side 1 lingers around tonic, subdominant, and dominant keys, side 2 is much more varied in its tonalities. Side 2 begins in D for the Venus and Mars reprise, but it quickly heads off in new directions, not returning to the home key until the final proper track. Side 1 is somewhat static tonally, and then side 2 takes us on a journey, but eventually brings us back to where we started. So perhaps the tonalities on the 2 sides of the record are their own yin and yang, exploring the concepts of home and away, or stasis and motion, or maybe simply near and far. The album opens with the song Venus and Mars. The lyrics, like the tonality, seem to emphasize the idea of stasis, sitting in the stands of the sports arena, waiting for the show to begin. The only other lyrics in the song are a series of apparent non sequiturs. Red lights, green lights, strawberry wine, a good friend of mine follows the stars, Venus and Mars are all right tonight. The protagonist in the song is sitting and waiting. Only the good friend exhibits any kind of motion or movement as they follow the stars. So the lyrics of the opening theme song reinforce the idea of home or stasis that is reflected in the overall tonal scheme on side 1. The lyrics of Venus and Mars reprise on side 2 focus much more on a journey. While the protagonist begins by standing and waiting, instead of waiting for the show to begin, which would involve remaining in place, this time they're waiting for the transport to come. They're waiting to be taken away. The theme on side 1 only has 1 verse, but the reprise has 2. The lyrics of the second verse speak of a journey. Come away on a strange vacation, holiday hardly begun. While side 1 was home, side 2 takes us away on a strange vacation. And because we're only about 40 seconds into side 2, this trip has hardly begun. Verse 2 goes on to include more action and motion as the protagonist runs into a good friend and reaches for the stars. The phrase reach for the stars is often meant metaphorically, but McCartney uses it as a way of describing this adventure out into space on Starship 21ZNA9. The reprise then takes us on a much longer musical journey than we heard on side 1. Where the first theme was 1 minute and 19 seconds long, the reprise clocks in at 2:06, 47 seconds longer. That doesn't sound like much time, but in the context of these short songs, the reprise ends up being almost 60% longer than the side 1 theme. The music enacts the trip through the cosmos. The The Venus and Mars song also sets the stage for how the album will proceed tonally. Both the side 1 theme and its reprise are in the home key of D and end with an extended instrumental vamp that repeats the chords G, A, F, D. On side 1, we hear that chord pattern 3 times before it transitions into Rock Show. In the reprise, when we take that strange vacation, we hear it a full 10 times. Interestingly, that G-A-F-D chord progression gives us the roots of all but one key we will hear on the album. But if we look at the entire Venus and Mars song, the only remaining chord root outside of G, A, F, and D is E, which is tonic of Spirits of Ancient Egypt. Thus, the key of each song on the album is prepared by the chords utilized in the Venus and Mars theme. The song's chord progression foreshadows the album's tonal plan. We might think of the chords in the theme song as being local harmonies, simply occurring within the song, but they evolve into global harmonies or tonalities, the keys heard in the rest of the album. This process is akin to what musicologists call organicism, wherein large-scale structures are derived from small-scale or local musical events. Organic unity entails a certain relation of parts and whole, a relation that is not arbitrary, but as close and intimate as that among the organs of a living body. Though stylistically the songs on the album are incredibly diverse, the opening theme prepares us for them in so many ways. The next 2 songs after the theme on side 1 present us with our next 2 most prominent keys. Rock Show is in A, the dominant, and Love and Song is in G, the subdominant. These first 3 songs are presented together on the album without a break. Venus and Mars segues seamlessly into Rock Show. As Rock Show comes to a close, it begins to fade out, but overlaps slightly with the entrance of Love and Song, creating a blurred division between the two. The brief silence that follows the conclusion of Love and Song, nearly 10 minutes into the album, is actually the first silence since the record began. These 3 wildly different songs are presented together as an opening suite, reflecting the band's intention of flowing things into one another. As the rest of side 1 proceeds, it continues to hover around D and its dominant and subdominant satellites. Side 1 ends with Letting Go. The song begins in A minor, the dominant, but 2/3 of the way through there is a modulation up to C minor. We're almost at the halfway point of the album, and this is the first time we've heard a key other than tonic, subdominant, or dominant. This modulation happens perhaps as a way of letting go of the original key areas and providing a clue as to what will happen tonally on side 2. Following the Venus and Mars reprise on side 2, we begin our tonal journey, our strange vacation away from D, G, and A. In reality, there are only 2 songs that veer into foreign keys, Spirits of Ancient Egypt in E and Call Me Back Again in F. Compared to side 1, however, this is quite a departure. As we near the end of side 2, we gradually return to familiar tonal space. Listen to What the Man Said is in G, the subdominant. This is followed immediately without a break by the 2-part song Treat Her Gently, Lonely Old People. The Treat Her Gently section begins in A, the dominant, but settles in D, tonic, before it moves into Lonely Old People. The actual final track, Crossroads, serves only as a short instrumental coda to the album, extending and reinforcing the home key of D. Thus, this sequence of songs executes a large-scale 4-5-1 tonal pattern, a final cadence if ever there was one. If we think of this sequence prior to Crossroads as 3 separate musical entities, we see a tonal plan that mirrors the opening suite of Venus and Mars, Rock Show, Love and Song. Side 1 begins with a 1-5-4 tonal pattern. Side 2 reverses that progression, ending with a 4-5-1 pattern. As mentioned previously, the motion from dominant to tonic or 5-1 releases tension. By moving from A to D at the end of this album, we have returned home. Our journey is complete. The strange vacation is over. Starship 21ZNA9 has landed. While the album features a variety of musical styles from hard rock to music hall, there are numerous factors that tie them all together, including lyrical themes, tonal organization, and a series of yin and yang type dualities. This metaphor of Venus and Mars being yin and yang, home and away, side 1 and side 2, is not a perfect one-to-one, nor is it all-encompassing. Side 1 does not equal Venus and side 2 Mars any more than Linda is Venus and Paul is Mars. However, though I only discussed a few examples, the album does set up a multitude of distinct dualities: tonic and dominant, major and minor, light and dark, good and evil, familiar and exotic, near and remote. At times, these dualities appear on a local level, in chord progressions or lyrical passages. Elsewhere, they're enacted on a larger scale, from one song to the next, or from side 1 to side 2. McCartney insisted he was unaware of any allegorical meanings, stating that it was written in 1974, and in those days, a lot of people who were into concerts were also into alternate thinking. They'd want to know what your sign was, and they'd place some relevance on that. I was never like that. As far as I was concerned, Venus and Mars were just two random planets. His insistence of ignorance, however, doesn't make the album less meaningful. Music and lyrics seemed to pour out of McCartney, often emerging intuitively. He would usually be content for context and meaning to come to light after the fact. With Venus and Mars, McCartney exerted more thought, time, and effort into the conception of the album than he has with almost any other in his career, carefully selecting songs and determining their proper sequence. Whether he was cognizant of the multiple meanings of Venus and Mars, or if he was thinking of keys or tonal areas when he compiled the album, he admitted that it's always nice when other meanings appear. It's a strong force in what I do. It's not so much I believe in it as I'm delighted by it when I find it, and therefore I believe in it. That's quite a cosmic approach to creativity for someone who was never like that. Perhaps for McCartney and this album, the stars were truly aligned. Venus and Mars were then, and indeed remain, all right tonight. This content was adapted from a presentation I gave in the Beatles area at the Pop Culture Association Conference in New Orleans in April 2025. I have lots more McCartney and Beatles content on my YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Thanks!